Okay, so what are we here to talk about, Jason Paris?
The future of the industry.
Actually, the schedule says future of painters.
Yeah, good luck. You're all going down. The industry will move on without you.
No.
It's called robots.
I think it's the... Yeah, Elon had a pretty interesting display of robots the other day.
Those are my favorite memes, the robot one. Did you get the one I sent you last night?
I did, yep.
Where you name the robot dad, and then you make it say it's proud of you.
Didn't have to say that out loud. That actually touched me quite a bit. Can't wait for my dad robot. It's going to be so great. We can't share a dad robot, though. It's my dad robot is mine, and you can have your own.
Oh, gosh, it's so good.
All right. Yeah, so let's talk about the future of the painting industry. You and I, we travel a lot. We have traveled a lot. And honestly, what we talk about a lot is current state of the industry, past state of the industry, what's going on in the future. And we always take in a lot of real data points and anecdotal data points. So let's start talking about years ago when we entered the industry. What was this like? I mean, it's been 7 or 8 years since you and I just showed up at a craftsmanship forum, and we were like, what is all this?
Yeah. Well, you got your start painting pretty early.
Very early.
I started in 2006 as a painter. When we first met at the Craftsman Forum in Chicago.
Yep.
And just even the PCA as a snapshot, it was mostly a lot of boomers with beer bellies that were not there to learn about business, but wanted a business expense vacation. Sorry, boomers. Where they could say like, "Oh, I hate my wife," and then get drunk. It's a little.
We actually shared some tips and some tricks and some other things too.
I'm so sorry.
Jason, you get to say the spicy stuff. I'm the board chair.
But you could contrast it with where it is now, which is a much more diverse gender in the room, much more diverse ethnically. There's also a lot more business focus and interest in the room, and that's been a stark change.
And it's been interesting because for the 140-year history of the PCA, there has been many things that have not changed. If you guys saw the first kickoff opening video of all this stuff, I mean, literally, they're talking about here to professionalize the industry, help in times of distress. Like literally, that's what we talk about. So we are still doing this, but as we travel around, when we started going to these things, the PCA and the humans involved in the PCA were not a direct reflection of the industry. And we have seen that change pretty drastically over the years. Like you said, it's younger, more entrepreneurial, and certainly more diverse now.
Yeah, and then the industry on itself has changed, and this is just the slow progress and march of professionalization. Mm-hmm. And you and I like to joke about boomers a lot, and then I do it publicly.
You do, and I try to be polite. That's you.
But there's something. So I always look at boomers like, oh my goodness, they had it so easy. You could buy a house in the 1970s for a firm handshake and a couple of raspberries, and then sell it for $2 million 40 years later. That must have been real tough. And then you started a business. You named it AAA Painting, so it's at the start of the phone book, and just rode that wave for your entire career. Nice job. And I think people are going to look at me the same way, and you the same way. Where it's like, wow, you put a scheduling widget on your website so that people could schedule their own estimates, and it blew their mind, and you could adopt it. And then you showed up to bids, you gave them a bid on the spot, and you were the top of the market. All you had to do is execute. Must have been real hard to be a millennial.
Well, listen, we don't need to be roasted by the next generation. We do it to ourselves. We've said the words a million times. If you have a website, answer your phone, you're not a crook, boom, business.
Yeah, to the extent that you can then execute.
Yeah.
And that's where the phrase we said a long time ago, which is your only competition is your ability to execute your business model.
Yep.
That is not how it will always be. No. That's not how it is in most industries, but it's where it is right now. And that's because the demand for professional home services far outstrips the supply.
Yep.
And you've seen that supply start to rise a little bit in things like plumbing and HVAC and electric. We can start to charge a premium. And I got this from the marketing guy, Nate, in the back, because those are novel industries and that they have urgency and they have a high cost of repair. Both those things are absent in painting. You don't have timeline painting emergencies in painting, rarely. Sometimes it's a graduation party, but there's a different level of timeline emergency when you have a plumbing leak or an electrical outage. And the cost of rework with painting, most of the time you just repaint it.
Yep.
The cost of rework with electrical or plumbing, that's a big, big issue. So that's not to say that painting will not professionalize, because it does not have those two features in it, but it's been a lagger for a good reason. And I give Nate Streeter all the kudos for that thought.
Yeah. We track a lot of stats on the industry, and my mission for 2025 is to get some updated stats because I feel enough has changed to where we move out of the margin of error, and I want some updated stats. And this is actually harder. This is harder than it would seem because people hear me talk all the time about 99% of our industry is single owner operators. And this stat actually changed in the last 8 years. You and I started probably at 80%, and then we moved it up to 90. I feel like we've moved that stat based on a lot of data and some anecdotal stuff that we used to think 80 to 90% of the industry was single owner operators. I think the longer we do this, the more that points to 99% of our industry being 1 to 1.5 people in a business.
Yeah, and there's some nuances. As I always say,
lots of it.
Figures lie and liars figure whenever Nick throws out a stat. But then when I say it, it's like, Nick, respect the data.
That's great. Respect the craft.
Yep. There's a couple of things to that maybe I'll comment on. One is I'm a little bit shocked that I haven't seen an aggregation yet from our vendors where we'd say that the average account size has skyrocketed or we're starting to grow. I kind of would expect that by now, that the paint stores would be seeing more consolidation, but they have not at least messaged that out. You'd also say, okay, Paris Painting is one $12 million company that employs 100 plus subcontractors that are out there at a small size. So it's kind of like maybe the labor structure that we're currently operating in for most of the U.S. sways that data a little bit. But then I'd also say I think that is changing if you look at what the big money is doing and what they're doing strategically. So sometimes you may not have access to the data, or data may not be telling you something that you would make a decision on, but then you look at what some of the big players are doing and you kind of read some of their strategy and decision making. And we'll just keep talking about them because they are platinum sponsors. But I'd say both Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore, a lot of their strategic initiatives have gone more and more towards the business building. So a lot of their, you go to a pro show, it's less about, it isn't absent yet, but it's less about here's a new tape or a new sprayer tip. A lot of the draw these days is more how do you build a business? And so if they're starting to gear their messaging and strategic initiatives that way, and you and I have sat in some pretty high level meetings, you'd say, oh, that's interesting that they're doing that. They maybe have access to some data or at least are willing to put their dollars behind that strategic concept that we're both waiting for.
Anybody here take Business Foundations, Business Accelerator with the PCA? Raise your hand. Okay. Very interestingly, 4 or 5 years ago, when you were moving up through the ranks of the PCA and we sat in on these meetings, you and I had believed that we've experienced it in our own businesses that professionalization solved a lot of things. It solved the paint issue, it solved the client issue, it solved the labor, the leads, and everything else. And then when we would sit in on these high-level meetings, we saw the major players in our industry slowly move away from holding up a can of paint to, like you said, these business building days. And all of a sudden, we're like, oh man, kismet. Like, we're at the helm of a 140-year-old nonprofit that literally serves to build better contractors. And here's the industry, the people who have the biggest supporters of the PCA want to do the same thing. And you were really instrumental in the birth of. We had painters training. It's the world standard for painters training. It's rigorous, but we were always missing the business part. And so you were instrumental in reading the room, reading the industry and the stats, and then making that appear for the good of our industry.
So I think, this was a little contrarian view at the time. For those of you who remember back, it was all about there's a labor shortage and we need people to get into painting. There's a labor shortage. How do we attract painters into the trade? How do we get, empower immigrants that are coming in? How do we get young kids that are already in this country to get interested in painting?
Don't go to college, go into painting.
Yeah, so I felt like that was the wrong root problem. I felt like the real root problem was there's a lack of qualified entrepreneurs in painting. Entrepreneurs solve problems way better than large corporate conglomerates. They definitely solve problems better than the government. And so to say that these are initiatives that either entity should be pushing forward to try and solve, I said, why don't we try and empower the entrepreneur? How do you attract entrepreneurs and business-minded people to enter the trades, they will solve the labor shortage way better than anybody else could, because there was this self-reinforcing error that was happening with unprofessionalized companies, which was you come work for a company, it's unprofessionalized, there's no standards, there's no pay scale, there's no good culture. You leave, start your own company, but you don't know quite what you're doing because you're never trained up in it. And so then there's kind of this round and about deal. As opposed to there's a few companies that are really good to work for, and then you start to see some stories where people get attracted to the trades because they see some people entering into a VP level staff role, or just the opportunity to grow and have a good time. But that is far outweighed by the massive tide of unprofessionalism that's going against it. So I think that was a great thing that the PCA helped drive on.
I know it was.
I think that our sponsors were phenomenal in getting behind it. But kind of saying that labor wasn't the real issue, but the real issue was business professionalism, felt contrarian at the time. I think it started to play out to be true.
And came off as contrarian. And it was, people didn't, well, imagine going to a room like this and saying, the common knee-jerk reaction was, hey, right, kids these days, where's all the good people? And we're all like, yeah, that's right, if I only had some good people. And we would always check this by saying, hey, Mr. Unprofessionalized, single owner, chucking a truck, which I was, if we drop 10 trained painters on you right now, how would that help? That would be chaos. You wouldn't know what to do with them.
Yeah, the lack of it, the real root, and this is what I love people in this room for who start their own companies, the true entrepreneurs here, is just the ability to solve problems. And it's like, I've always been a little bit mean to people. That's kind of my vibe. But it's like, you're just not good at problem solving. I'll just shoot you straight. They say, I can't find any labor. It's an impossible problem to solve. Like, if you can't solve problems, you should probably go work for a company. Maybe the DMV would be the place for you to go.
Well, geez, that's where the meanness comes. You didn't have to say DMV. You could have said anything else.
Because then, to your point, what happens when you get 10 painters? The very next issue is no one can sell like I can sell. It's impossible to train people to sell accurately. They miss things. No one can estimate. It's the worst. Then what's the next issue? Right, the next issue is that nobody self-performs. I give them clear job descriptions. They don't do it. They need all this. They need coaching and support, and that's unrealistic.
Support all the time.
And that really comes into how do you build an organization. And I'd say that was the root issue. Is there's actually probably a dual threat, which is one, the lack of entrepreneurs who solve problems, and then two, kind of the very next stage is, do you have the skill sets and competencies to now build an organization? Because you're going to hit your head against the wall quickly as an entrepreneur, but then you're going to hit the wall again. You're going to hit the ceiling again when you get to that organizational build. And that's where I would just argue your only market cap is your ability to execute. How well can you execute your business model? And it doesn't have to be you. It can eventually be what is the team's ability to execute.
And we should say that, that's right. But this is novel, and this is a great competitive advantage for choosing this industry, because that's not true in stock trading. I mean, there's literally a competitive advantage if you're a stock trader in Manhattan is you buy a building one block closer to the stock exchange so that your internet wires are that shorter so you can make a quicker trade. Like it's that honed in and professional.
Yeah, and you'd say that's kind of the value prop of being in the Wild West, which is that if you can execute well, you can just grab market share. Now, as an industry starts to get more professionalized and you say the supply starts to meet the demand, it gets a little bit more built out. Now you're really competing in the margins, and it's just a lot tougher.
Yeah.
But I would say it's a lot more painful what everybody in this room does right now. Like, it is painful and hard to build a professional painting company because it's not always the clearest roadmap. It's not something that people can easily do. So you go through that pain, but then there's a big reward on it. If the pain wasn't there, the reward would be a lot lower.
So what's really interesting is, you came in as the youngest board chair in PCA history. What you did not say is the best board chair, so we'll get to that later. But
I can't say that.
Yeah. Okay, so you came in and you were contrarian, you were young, you were doing novel things in the industry, and we sort of happened upon what we talked a lot about as a force multiplier effect, which is if we do our job and gave the industry what they were asking for, we would have brought one painter into the industry. But really what you're talking about is a higher level strategy of, we'll find an entrepreneur. We're all entrepreneurs in this room. Some of us are unpolished diamonds. We just need some direction. I did. I mean, literally everything we're talking about was the story of me. I am the most prototypical customer of the PCA. I can benefit the most, I can get the most, and I have. So bringing somebody like me in who had that spirit of the willingness to have a high pain tolerance and a big work ethic and solve problems. But I had no examples in my life of what that looked like. Showing them the way by the humans in this room and some business training, I'll go out and now I'll find my own painters. Like I don't think we've met a professional painting company in the United States that it was completely impossible for them to find labor or leads. Somehow they managed. Now they may want more of those things, but nobody banged their head against the wall and say, I can't find a single one.
Right. It is the first thing that you complain about because it's the first problem that you oftentimes have to solve when you start recruiting outside of your friends and family.
Yep.
There's a thought I just had. It's a little bit like Christian, like squirrel.
That's what we're here for.
Bing bong. Which was the thought. You're talking about force multipliers, and this would be like my current contrarian view for the PCA. And so we get a lot of pressure from our champions who have not raised their sponsorship with inflation over the last 5 years.
I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, you guys are great.
I appreciate you guys.
No, it's the best.
Can't speak for Jason.
But the dollar has been devalued by like 20% over the last 3 years. So
I'm big fans, guys.
Anyways.
Big fans, still, and always will be.
Yeah, I think there's a success metric around membership. And I think you're doing the right thing by pushing membership, and membership has grown under your tenure, and that's a positive thing. I kind of view the mission as the PCA more about influence and impact. Okay. And so I view, what is our ability to influence and impact the industry overall? And if that's with 2,000 influential, high-performing people, I think that is phenomenal, and I'm very happy with that. And there's some discussions that we had. This is a little bit like backdoor, or like behind the curtains conversation maybe. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like if somebody is a member of the PCA and they decide to put on their own painting event, I call that a big success because I think copycats and the way that we can inspire people to professionalize the industry is an awesome thing. If somebody goes and starts another organization, I also wouldn't call that a big loss. I think the PCA is best at when it's influencing the industry as opposed to trying to like puff its chest with a membership number.
Aggregate it should
continue to grow, and it has grown under your tenure, and it should continue to do that. But I like the focus of even like you or myself, where I'd say I joined the PCA 6 years ago. Paris Painting was a onesie twosie $1 million company. Now it's 12, and does that mean that I'm still one member? And what's the influence that membership has grown to? Yeah. And I look at the membership that we have today in the PCA as opposed to when you and I first got involved and came in. And it's hard to not look at that and say, wow, the level of influence on the industry in the room has not, gone up in a tremendous way.
The value of a member has risen if you think about it as that over our tenure here.
And I see a lot of members and a lot of people in this room. People look up to you in your local area, and they see you and they say, "Wow, I'd like to be like that person." And what better mission can the PCA than to have to influence the industry through our membership, where there's always little role models, because that's sometimes the biggest challenge or barrier to getting top level talent into an industry is they don't have a good role model. And so when people come out and they see people like Michael, right? Michael, a lot of women will look at Michael and say, well, now there's like a real role model of somebody running a business. I can see myself becoming like her. I'm now going to enter the industry when they may not have 6 years ago, right? Or they may see the 605 guys like, oh, here's some like cool guys. I'm a cool guy. I was going to go work at Monster Energy Drink.
We're all cool guys.
Now, what if I get into painting? Like I have a role model of somebody showing me what's possible. Yeah. And I would just say there's a large percentage of our membership that I think is achieving that in their area. And that is like an undervalued or underrepresented strategic thing that we're doing.
Yeah, there's and that's why we're trying to shift because almost all these organizations, every nonprofit, when you think about a Veterans of Foreign Wars, an American Legion, a Kiwanis Club, the PCA, most of these were still there was a very distinct form of nonprofit or community organization that formed after World War II. We were obviously there before there, but all of them did the Reformation then, and they're all sort of this, put your $5 in a coffee can. We'll have a meal. We'll read the meeting minutes. We'll talk about a few items, and we're out the door. And that's not, when you look around the room here, that's not what gives us energy. So over the past 4 to 5 chairs, you guys have had to do a lot of reformation work to this thing, not because things were bad, but because things now had to meet the new goals and the new demographics of our industry. And so all of this stuff has been changed. Before, it was, we were only judged by how many members you had. We never talked about the industry stats, making people's lives better and things like that. It was really more about just gathering humans in the room. And just like our own businesses, the conversation has completely shifted. We never really lost sight of it, but we know how important it is now.
Okay, so it's kind of like if you
give
have
the benefit to our people.
Yeah, if you had like 1,000 more members, but they never went to an event or engaged in the industry.
If there's 1,000 members we never met or never showed up here, I don't think that's a win.
Right. If you have like, your membership goes from attending one industry event to 4 industry events, and they all triple in size, and the content that you are able to put out through your internal media generation team is now consumed at 10 times X what it was 6 years ago. Those are cool things that I think the PCA should be proud of.
Women in the room. How many were at Women in Paint? That's a lot of people. That was literally weeks ago in a hurricane. 2 weeks ago in a hurricane, you guys were down in Florida doing that, and now you're here. So the value of a member of the PCA is very interesting, and it's much more valuable than it was. And when you think about more stats, data and feelings, the feelings is all these things we're talking about. The data is, when you look at a PCA member, we are 15 times larger, more successful, and longer lived than the average painting contractor. And that is true statistics. Our buying power is much larger.
Yeah, you can be a beacon to what's possible. So there's an AV guy in the back who actually is in the painting industry, and I was chatting with him. He's like, I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't know like what's possible, and this is inspiring. I'm thinking about joining the PCA, and it's like, this is perfect. Like, this is what we're for. It's to give that kind of beacon of light to say, this is what's possible. Let's inspire you, drive you to be better, and you get that aggregate of this big wave coming up and raising the level of the industry. And I think we all do better when we all do better when it comes to professionalization. Not the boomers, obviously.
Oh, jeez. God dang it. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan.
I'm joking. But, we all do better when we all do better. And it's better. Yeah, it's that self-reinforcing circular cycle that was heading in the wrong direction 6-8 years ago.
So I am on a quest this next year. I am not elected to my final term. I believe I have one more year of eligibility to be the chair. Should my fellow board members choose, I will serve again. I would love to do that for everybody. My mission, one of the things I'd like to do before I leave, is update these stats. And it's a lot harder than you think. So I'm going to be leaning on all of our members, all of our friends, certainly our economist and things like that, to update these stats. And we're gonna have a really interesting metric about influence coming up this next year, where we're going to aggregate a lot of this stuff. Membership is like the price of a can of paint. It's just there. You can't get around it. You gotta force it. You're forced to look at it all the time and reckon with it, even though it's a very small expense in our companies. Labor is big, and that's sometimes squishy. We don't account for that, so we don't pay attention to it. Membership is that thing that's there. We can't get around. And our theory, a couple of years ago, when we kind of proposed a new strategy for the board of directors, was this, which is, I have never met a PCA member who has been to one of these events that didn't love the PCA, meet friends, gather something, mind blown, mind expanded, and they did something after that. I've never met a person who is completely disenfranchised, didn't feel welcome, walked away with no value, and magically, when you see somebody come for their first one, then you start seeing their faces elsewhere. You see them pop up online, you see them in webinars, you see them at more events. So we kind of had this theory about the PCA being sticky. If we could just get everybody into these rooms to be around each other, because when you meet the humans in these rooms, it's just become sticky. And that was a joke that nobody laughed at. I'm feeling really self-conscious about that. So can you back me up here?
I will back you up and say it feels bad when people don't laugh. That's
God dang it.
I know what it's like.
It wasn't what I was looking for.
Does not feel good.
It's like, Nick, you're really good at this. It's fine. Okay. But no, that's strategy. Strategy now is you can tell that we've gotten really intentional about events. There are 4 kind of ancillary events in our big Super Bowl, the Expo, and a whole bunch of stuff going on in the industry. So I'm just very excited to be a part, along with all of you guys, of trying to fulfill the mission of the PCA, doing right by our members, and I want to see those stats move. Those stats, again, These stats are not our membership numbers. When I see the average size of a painting business in the United States go from 1.5 to 2.3, when I see the average take-home pay for a business owner move from $43,000 a year to $51,000 a year, that is not, huzzah, we moved a number. That is somebody's life was changed. And that's just a sign that what we're doing here, what we've experienced, is making it down to the people, allowing the industry to professionalize, allowing the clients to expect a better service, prices go up, more lives change, and then the industry looks different.
And it's what's necessary to meet that demand. And we talked about the future of painters, I think is the phrase. It's kind of like the way that so many other industries have gone. And I think a classic one is farming. So farming, by and large, was mostly done throughout America with family farms. And everybody had a family farm, and they were salt of the earth, and everyone worked super hard. And that is just not the way farming is today.
Yep.
I'll tell you, it's done through machinery, futures options, and insurance. That's what drives farming today. And there are if you've had a farm for 100 years in America, it's a family farm, you get a nice big plaque because it's super rare. Because most kids do not want to take over the family farm. They'd rather do something that is a little more just different.
Just different.
That's
very kind, Jason. Nicely done, man.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Yep.
Don't disparage farmers. We're in Minnesota.
Yeah. No, I just say that is like a very common thing. You've seen that in the dental industry. You've seen that in obviously the licensed trades to this point. Some of you have heard me opine about breweries and how we start to attract people that aren't just into painting. Like breweries used to attract to people that like to drink. Now, if you start a brewery, you likely are an MBA student looking for a 5-year exit. People who have started painting companies historically really like painting. And how do we get people who are business-minded to enter into the painting industry to start to look for either liquidity or equity?
Yeah, because when you take a step back from that, well, we are, if 90+% of all businesses are single owner operators, that is a highly fragmented, generally unprofessionalized industry. And you say, okay, that's fine, except when you go into banking, there is not a one-person bank. 90% of all banks are not single owner operators out there doing things. If you want to start a bank, there's a huge barrier to entry.
Yeah.
There's federal licensing, right? But for us, there is not that barrier to entry, so we have a completely different sort of market, and fragmented markets don't last forever.
Well, and a lot of it depends on the consumer demand. And we talk about the future. I would say just the future of the industry is going to be decided by the consumer. And
can we get slides up here when you get a chance? Yeah.
I told him we didn't have slides, but you do have some slides.
We do have slides.
Super helpful slide. I would say the future of the industry is going to be decided by demand. It's going to be decided by the consumer. And if the consumer wants to pay what is required to establish the infrastructure to start to provide professionalized service, then supply will meet that demand because there's profit involved, and that's what capitalism does. If consumers do not have a high preference for these additional value adds, then the companies that service them or provide those options will find themselves not able to scale, and those additional things will start to diminish. So like a good example of this that I've given before is online delivery. The government didn't come in and say, if you're going to sell something online, you have to buy a license and deliver things within 1 week, or you can't sell things online in America. Consumers, Amazon made that bet first and said, I'm going to provide 2-day delivery. Now consumers demand timely delivery for anything that's sold online. And it didn't used to be that way 10, 15 years ago.
No.
And that's something where, I just want to reiterate, if consumers like scheduling their own appointments online, if they like it when someone with a polo shirt that looks clean cut shows up and gives them an estimate the same day, shows up on time, they get pre-campaign drip emails, they schedule a job, they can see where their job is scheduled, they have handoff communications that's clean. If they value those things, a lot of those things require infrastructure of an organization that's hard to replicate through the solopreneur model. That is the incentive of demand that will drive supply to meet it because there's additional profit, and that's what capitalism does.
I know in our travels, we get a lot of time to talk about this stuff and theorize and ideate about what it's going to take to change the industry. When is it going to be? How is it going to change? What's going to be the driver? And what I hear you say is consumer preference, right? And often we talk about within the PCA and within the industry, an idea that I sort of think I understand called critical mass, right? Where think about the teeter-totter. teeter-totters down on one side. You build mass till all of a sudden at the fulcrum, it tips over because you hit the point of critical mass. And I'm not going to claim to be an expert in that, but the teeter-totter thing makes sense. And I think about it with the PCA with membership. Once you get a whole bunch of members, it's easier to get the next bunch of members. Once our industry gets to a certain point of professionalization, it's going to tip over where the majority of the painters are professionalized. Now, the ideation comes in, which is, how's that going to happen? When's that going to happen? I have some slides about my theory, but I want to hear your theory first about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through what the limiting factor would be. Things just take time. There's an element to that. Consumer preference takes time to
Stated
change.
like a good economist.
Though a good economist would say
hand.
you don't know. That's the best economist answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. It could be 50-50.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, I don't know.
Who can say?
I don't know.
Okay, I have slides.
Yep.
All right. This is the equation for nuclear fission that quantifies critical mass. Stay with me. Jason, I think this is above both of our heads, but I did try to actually figure out what the critical mass of this industry is with my basic understanding of math and oil primer. So, number one, critical mass, M with the tiny c, I'm sure that's got a formal name, is critical mass. The formula is 1 divided by that stuff. That O with the thing with the hair off to the side and the F is the likelihood of nuclear fission times, I understand X to be in these things, is the particle. What is the likelihood of the particle is going to reach critical mass and do that? So if critical mass equals 1, and I would say instead of fission and particle, likelihood of professionalism and the density of the owner, the density of the particle, this is the funnest one to calculate and ideate on. 1 divided by 5%, the likelihood of professionalization, which is right now 5% of the industry, times 18 months. 18 months, I would argue, is the average lifespan of a business owner, of a paint business in the United States. That means 1.1% improvement towards critical mass per year. Taken out, it's 37 years from now, our industry will be professionalized in the year 2061.
I would say man directs his own steps, but the Lord guides his path.
Data and feelings. It's a beautiful thing. No. So, I mean, honestly, this is a little bit of a joke that not enough people did not laugh at again. That's fine. I made an attempt at humor. I'll replay this moment for many days after this. But if being honest, 37 years, if nobody does anything, that might be right. There's many things that can change that, right? Zach Kinney, do you have your hand up? Yeah. So 20 to 30% is that critical mass point where then, so it's the same theory about like endangered species. At what point can this not recover? At what point will this take off in a hockey stick curve, right? And the theory is 20 to 30%?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to pray, and that will help. You think
job costing works too. All right. So 37 years, things that will accelerate. Jason, if my theory is that 37 years from now, if we do nothing, we'll meander on along and that'll be that. What will possibly accelerate that? What will happen, or what can we do to accelerate that?
Consumer preference. I think the influencers. So when people get a taste, some people don't know what they want until they get a taste for it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like online delivery. It's like, do I really need things delivered in 2 hours? The answer is yes. I need
Once
it.
you feel that
beautiful
beautiful 2 hours.
Yes. So yeah, I think it's really how much do you penetrate people's psyche to convince them or make them aware of what they actually want. And that is kind of like the beauty of, it's not capitalism, of consumerism, right? Is that someone was asking Nate about market share and market cap, and I would say there's no market cap in any population to what the painting could be, because humans are unsatiable in our desires to be content. So if you can market it strong enough, you can convince somebody like, yeah, you should change the paint color of your house every day. You're like, oh, that's insane. But I'd say if you look at the standard of living that we all enjoy, as opposed to even 50 years ago, they'd say like, do you really need all these things? You say, yes, I do. They'd say, wow, that seems insane. So you can create your own demand in that sense.
Yeah, that's true. I do believe that we always talk about, well, listen, the consumer will likely, if I have to theorize, I will say that the consumer, Danny, we'll get to you in a second here. I believe that the consumer will drive it, because at some point, the theory is always if you get 10 estimates, and right now by industry stats, you have less than a 1 chance of finding a professional Paris painting out there to get there to your house. If you called 10 painters for an estimate on your house, and the theory is 3 to 4 of them now are Paris painting and the other ones aren't, all of a sudden the ones that, we always label the undercutters, which I don't truly believe are undercutters, are just uninformed, entrepreneurs or painters who started their own business. All of a sudden they look like the outliers and not the one guy who charges 40% more than everybody. So that's when we always our experience is these undercutters are killing us. These guys are out there. They know my prices and they're just bottom dollaring. If I'm being honest, I've never met a painting company that intentionally charged half price to get jobs. I believe everybody we're talking to is thinking they're charging as much as they possibly can for these things.
Yeah, and before we get to Danny, it's a great ethos and attitude, which is you never want to point down, whether it's in business or in life or with your social circle or friends. You never point down. You always extend an arm to pull them up.
Yeah.
Go, Danny.
You should do that to boomers in our champion.
I know. Okay, I apologize to the boomers. I'm a millennial, so I kept hearing about avocado toast and I'm lazy. So I need to do my own soul searching and heal that wound.
Yes, you do.
Should we do that right now?
Yes.
Okay.
No, let's get to Danny first.
Lay hands on me?
Never mind, that can wait.
Right.
We'll do that in the car on the way home.
I'll lay down.
Yeah.
Okay. What percentage of the industry right now is professionalized? And then how do you define a professionalized painting business?
Well, I would define a professionalized painting company as going through, there's about 8 things that I would use as an index to decide whether you're professionalized or not. I probably will not recite all of them, but they start with a standardized deliverable product by standard operating procedures. Do you know what primer, what tools, what stuff to do on cabinets? Is that a repeatable process? Number 1, you have a dependable, repeatable process. Then you start getting into metric-based estimating, a marketing plan, a recruiting and training plan, building a team, financials, things like that. And when you start going down the line of, it's a very quick litmus test of, are you professional? And for 2025, I'll be introducing the professional and the stability index to actually rate your companies with this through Ask a Painter. It's very easy. We don't even need to get to the 8th step. Do you have a job description for everybody in your company? Is there a pay scale? Is there a review process? Does that person know if they did well or not? Is there a one-on-one process? Do you have a regular job costing? Do you have a marketing plan that is guaranteed to drive amount of leads? Do you have a metric-based bidding system? Do you have a way to review a P&L? Do you have a way to set a goal and then work towards it? I mean, those are to me, that's a litmus test. And I usually don't have to get past, do you have a job description? What's that? And you're like, oh, well, we have a long way to go, not because people are bad, but because it's just not there. So if you go by that metric, I would theorize less than 1% of our industry has a skeleton of the basic things that all professional businesses do in the United States. If you extend that out to all the businesses in the United States, only 4 to 7% of all businesses, any industry, will ever create $1 million of revenue or higher per year. And I would argue, at that point, you kind of need employees at that point. You need to start putting some of those things in just by force. So that to me is an indication of painting industry. We have about 4 times less professionalization than the average business or industry in the United States. When you extend it out to banking and other very long-standing things, multiples smaller. So Jason.
Yeah, I'd say a good answer that could be correct, but I'll improve on it.
Oh,
and so
here we go.
I'd say the way you can tell you're professionalized is because it will change over time, right? A professionalized industry 100 years ago, or a professionalized business in any industry 100 years ago, that standard moves over time. So you'd say well, what does a professionalized company look like today or in 100 years or 100 years ago? And I believe it's when 3 categories meet the demand. And so when you can meet the demand needs of the client, then you're professionalized. So if a client is demanding one thing now and you're not able to meet it, you have not professionalized in that industry. The other would be the needs of your labor or of the workers. So we talked about job descriptions. 20 years ago, nobody may have wanted a job description, but now they do. So when they're demanding, your labor's demanding something, you're not able to meet that demand, you're unprofessionalized. When you meet, you are professionalized. The third is the owner. What are the owners? What's the pocketbook? What are those expectations like? It could be very different. What are the profit incentives required for how challenging it is when you meet that demand with your supply then it's professionalized. I think that opens it up because it will change over time
like
in those
that.
3 categories. And then we do have a hand in the back.
Yep. Tactics versus strategy. Love that.
Yep.
Labor and leads keep coming up.
Yep. And I'll just repeat the question, Josh, if you want me to. Or you could go. Oh, you can go to him. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Here's a mic. Yeah, okay.
You're
So-
not allowed to ask a marketing question.
I'm not asking any marketing questions. Okay, so my question is, I wonder about that tipping point when I think about like plumbing or HVAC or those others. I wonder if a better way to think about that would be a percentage of the revenue rather than a percentage of the businesses. Does that make sense? Because what I think
Yes.
is happening in
Yeah.
plumbing and HVAC is that, sure, there might be some chuck in a truck still, but they have a very, very, very small percentage of the revenue. Like mostly it's dominated by $5 million to $50 million plumbing companies and HVAC companies now, right? They have almost all the revenue. So I feel like the tipping point for painting, if I'm really understanding that book, which I want to read because I read the first one, is, well, when we have 30% of the revenue would probably be a better way to think about it.
I like that a lot because the stats could stay the same, but the shift in revenue could go, that would be might be different scale then. Yeah, I love that.
That's why Nate gets paid the big bucks.
Love that. Oh, these marketers.
Oh, my raise.
I'll make sure that gets into your performance review for next quarter.
Pizza party next week.
Corporate overlord. Ugh. All right. That's a good thing to put into the influence index for next year.
We've got about 20 minutes left till we're going to do closing fun things. So we can open up maybe a Q&A. If people don't ask questions, then you and I will just talk to each other.
Then we'll turn the chairs in. So better get those questions ready.
They don't
Otherwise,
have
it's
to.
going to be Nick and Jason time.
There's many discussions. Okay.
Yes, sir.
There's many things I could talk about, and I've got them teed up. Like brushing your teeth.
So technology is growing really fast. I think ChatGPT is automating a lot of things like customer support and everything. I want to know what's the technology that could really remove big chunks of the residential painting industry that we should look out for. I think now it's like a no-brainer to have like a CRM. You should have like a scheduling that's like online. Like tracking has become really high, but I'm trying to figure out like what's the next disruptor in the industry. I'm really just curious what your thoughts are.
Jason?
Maybe just you said to remove, or what was the question?
Yeah, so I noticed like when it comes to certain parts of like reporting or certain parts of like acquiring, like there's a lot of data that's being transferred through automations. So I feel like it's like I've seen a lot of companies, especially corporations in other industries, removing employees, saying like a really great example would be like just copywriting and creatives. If you don't have AI, you're just not getting hired because we don't need your creativity. The AI is starting to become more and more creative with that. Now I'm trying to see how can we relate that into the painting and contracting industry, which still has like, I call them dinosaurs, not boomers. So
Still not nice.
still not nice, I guess so. Because dinosaurs, like
I call them friends.
Legacy,
awesome.
legacy builders.
I just mean like, what's the next disruptor that's gonna be the one where they're gonna be forced, or else we're gonna slice a big chunk of fat in the industry.
Yeah.
So what's the next technology that we should look out for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I just say innovation in general. And the more technology continues to increase, it's just there's a greater disparity of the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And so if you're not innovative, if you're not solving problems, if you don't have an organization that can take advantage of each new lever that comes out, the gap only widens. And we've seen that in our industry, to date.
Yeah.
The ability to have forward referencing circular calculations happened was in the 1980s. It was called a spreadsheet. And that took a long time to adopt in this industry. But people that were able to do that could go run a lot faster and scale a lot quicker than those who did not. So technology continues to march on. We get longer and longer levers. Not everyone knows how to reach up and grab them and pull them. So I don't know the answer to that, but I would just say your ability to innovate, your ability to have an organization that take advantage of technology just widens the gaps between the haves and the have-nots when it comes to scaling.
And then that gets exacerbated in a very unprofessionalized industry too. When people don't know that that's maybe the way forward.
Farming is a great option or a great example too, right?
Great example.
You get the industrialization of America. People start using steam engines. They're just cleaning house. Then you start to learn that cash flow is not a real issue because you can leverage futures options. again, cleaning house. That is a good example that we could all opine on what that means for painting.
Tactical example is I finally figured out a great use with an immediate benefit of ChatGPT for my business, which is, I kicked the door open in my office this week. Kelly's back there, and I had this breakthrough, and they love it when I come in with all these great, hey guys, you'll never guess what I just discovered. Everything changes from here on. All that job costing that I collect, all that just beautiful, simple data of who is this client, where are they, where'd they come from, did Kelly manage the project, what was the GP, how many hours, what was the material percentage? I fed 3 years worth of that G Sheets into ChatGPT, and I started asking questions, and AI is not going to probably take anybody's job. People who understand AI are going to take people's jobs. That's how it's going to work. And what I saw was I use a guy from Fiverr. I pay him $100 a quarter to do this, and then I have to wait a week. Then I have to revise it. In 45 minutes on my own, I just eliminated him. And I just did it on my own. I could ask it more things than I could. For all the questions I got, for all the data I did, prompted a lot by Nate Streeter in our conversation. You got my mind going, and I asked a series of questions that it would have taken me a very long time to do. So I truly believe that a basic understanding. This is the paint robots aren't coming yet. They're in the commercial world. There is drone pressure washers. There are automated sandblasters. There are paint robots. In the residential world, I still think we have a while, but you're going to see exactly what Jason said, which is great now that we have a influence index that we should be tracking, which is that 1 to 10% of professional painting companies, if they get a hold of ChatGPT and start feeding 10 years worth of data, marketing, job costing, they're going to have way more information, way quicker, and when somebody else doesn't have a website, doesn't have a separate checking account, and is frustrated with running a business, the gap widens. And then all of a sudden, that to me would exacerbate that hockey stick curve of professionalization, where there'll be right now, there is a night and day difference between the professional and the unprofessional. And it's just going to get so much wider with that. Yeah. Sorry, did I cut you off or something?
No, I was going to say a joke, and then I decided not to.
Wow.
It's the
great,
discipline of restraint.
Discipline of restraint. I like it. Anybody else?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't know. A couple questions. How long is the chairman, the tenure? How many years? And well, first I want to thank you because I found you 2 years ago, Lake Elsinore.
Yep.
Thank
Surf
you.
Prep
And
Masters class, baby. Love those.
And have you reached your goal as far as on your tenure, or what your expectations for your last year, if it's your last year next year?
Might not be voted in my last year. This might be the last time you guys ever see me. Who knows? We'll see. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. What were my goals? When I came in, I did not know. I was unintentional. I knew that, again, wayfinding. I know that through the PCA, with the PCA, more involved, more influence, more hand in was the path. And I honestly didn't know where that ended. I might not know where that is now. But I came in, my business needed a lot of work. I was what you would call unprofessionalized. I was still figuring things out, wayfinding my way all through it. They brought me in very quickly, and I was not a good board member. My first interaction with the board, I came in just like an entrepreneur who unilaterally leads a company come in. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing? Let's not do that. Let's do this. What are we all doing here? And then people like Jason and the rest of the board will pull me aside and say, well, listen, this is completely different for you, right? You are not Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration. You can't come in and change everything next week. You need to lead based on the mission of this organization, which may not be your personal mission, but it is the mission. If you want to play this game, you need to do this. And a lot of people gave me great advice. And Jason said a very wise thing to me, which is, this is going to be one of the most beautiful pieces of education that you get, is leading from a board. This is completely different than anything you've got. It's going to stress you as a leader. It's going to stretch you as a leader. And it truly has. And I am a completely different human, because when I look out over our board of directors and our executive director and our ops staff, every single person has a business larger, and I would argue more professional than me on that board of directors. And I have to stand in front of them and propose a strategy, right? You want to talk about nerves. If you guys saw me at the expo this last year, day one of that week is that board of directors meeting. That was way more stressful than anything I did at the PCA Expo. So when you guys all came for your welcome reception, I was literally just, oh my God, I made it, the board of directors meeting. And because we had proposed a new strategy, and we took a big leap of faith with the support of all my friends and fellow board members, and we made a marked change. And again, Jason came in as a little bit of a Bolshevik, suggesting something that wasn't a knee-jerk reaction, didn't even feel good when he proposed it. He looked out over a room of you guys and said, you're the problem. We need to fix you. It's not painters. And so we kind of came in with the same way, and mine was a little gentler, but we did a strategy that basically said, listen, we need to change the way we do this, and if we truly want membership, here's our play. It is a long play. We're investors here for the long run. We're a nonprofit. We don't need to get rich from this. We can take a very long view that if we focus on events, focus on the beautiful human interactions that are here, slowly, steadily, consistently, forever, give them high value at these things, membership will follow. Is Jill in the room? No? How far up are we on membership this year? 16%?
17.
17%. One of the biggest rises in membership since I've been a member in the PCA. So it didn't take that long, right? So you could argue data and feelings. By feelings, I've accomplished more than I ever thought was possible here. With the data, it's working. And we all know as entrepreneurs, you start a direct mail campaign and all you're doing is saying, please, Jesus, let leads come from this, right? Same thing with this, which is I stood up in front of people who are way more professional and bigger businesses than me, and I said, trust me, right? And they did, and it worked. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ismail Asir, and I have a question for you guys regarding the future of painters. I work with trade schools and students and high school seniors. How can we get more high school seniors looking at trade in terms of painting, instead of just going to 4-year school and spend $50,000 and getting that education and just get a skill and a pre-apprenticeship program and get that work hands-on?
What area are you in?
I'm in residential construction.
Or what geographic area?
All across the nation.
Okay. I would find top performing PCA members and have them come in and talk at one of your classes. I think the number one way you attract people from high school into the trades is they have someone who's a role model that they look up to. They say, I can see myself becoming that person. I can see myself wanting to become that person. I think that's by far the highest impact you can have. You can tell them, hey, demand outstrips supply, and there's a profit incentive, and there's a shortage of people. And it's like, oh gosh, there's a shortage. You want me to jump into something that nobody wants to do? You say, no, but the forecast is great. That's not going to land. When they see someone like Brad Ellison or even Zach Kenny, and they walk into the room.
Stumbled a little bit there. Are you sure about that pick?
He's
like, oh, he's right next to him.
I looked at one person. I was like, nope, not that person.
There's Brad. Oh, you no.
And they say, I could be like that through painting. They'd say like, wow, that is enticing. That's interesting. And that was the challenge I think this industry had for a long time, which was there weren't a lot of great role models. You kind of, and this is another stereotype that I can say because I am uncancelable.
I don't underwrite this. Go ahead.
Independently, well, I don't need to work. It's just, there are a lot, as you get to Thanksgiving and your uncle's a painter and he's drunk, he's divorced, he just looks obese and sad. And you say, why would I want to be like that? That does not look enticing. And that was by and large most of the industry. Okay. This is recorded. That's great.
You're live on the internet. This is Ask a Painter Live number 437 from the PCA Residential Conference.
Yeah. So there weren't a lot of great examples to say, I want to be like this person. I think it is much more prevalent. You can make a much more compelling case to say, this is inspiring. You can start out as a painter. You can grow to become a small business owner. You can have a great lifestyle business. You can have a great boutique business. You can become a large kind of conglomerate investor. There are many different life paths available to you, and it's through the vehicle of painting.
And I do want to talk about that, but Ishmael, Building Connected, Bronca Minnick, your organization has been saddled up with us for a long time. You're a local representative here. I have your business card. I'm going to bug you to death. One of the 8 areas of my life that I'm intentional about is volunteering. And the thing that I've been working on most recently is getting into the schools, because when I was in school, I was that B plus A minus student that did zero work, was constantly bored, staring out the window and saying, if teacher, will you just get out of my way and let me do my thing, I would be okay. That is a horrible way to go through life if nobody pulls you aside and says, slow down, young blood, you are an entrepreneur. And that's going to be a superpower later in your life, but right now it's pure hell. You want your parents to move out of the way. You want your teachers to move out of the way. You just want to get out and do stuff on your own. And my goal for this last 2 years has been to reach down into the high schools. You guys met young Jack, who is here. He's a product of that, which is I go there and I don't bring a paint sprayer with me. I don't bring a paintbrush. I don't talk about painting. I talk about how we've architected a lifestyle business with a paint business as a vehicle, a social media influencing business. Because you love this so much and you know enough, you can actually go out and talk to other people and they want to talk to you back. And then the proceeds from 2 service businesses get funneled into a real estate business. And to me, I took a big personal hit, because by the time I go through my presentation for these high school kids, the only thing they're interested in is, what's that real estate thing at the end? What's Nightingale Properties? I want to hear more about that. It's like, dude, I'm an influencer. Like, don't you kids like this stuff? Like on the TikToks and whatever? Like, they don't care anything about that. They don't even care it's a painting industry. They love the idea of, I want to do something. I don't care what it is, but that is a vehicle. And I like vehicles, and that real estate thing really interests me because everybody understands that. So at the end of every one of my presentations in high schools, I get 4 to 6 emails from those kids that say, I own a lawn mowing business. I own a car detailing business. I'm already an entrepreneur. I've never met somebody who owned their own business. My parents don't own a business. Their families don't own businesses. They connected, and these young, bright entrepreneurs like our young Jack are just waiting just to be contacted. So taking organizations like you, the Youth of America, and rampant servant leaders like this, that's the way. And if you want to see that hockey stick curve sooner, that 30% critical mass, that's how we're going to do it, Ishmael. Yep. Oh, last thing, we'll get to one more question, but one of the things we've been ideating about too that I can't leave this conference without saying is the idea of lifestyle business. We have been really interested, and it gives us a lot of energy about, sometimes people think that the PCA is all about being Paris. $12 million with a holdings company and everything else. And what we've been talking about this week is great. If it meets your personality, do it. But in this room are many examples. I would argue all the examples of single owner operators, mid-level businesses, mid to high, and monster businesses, all of who people have time and money freedom, love their life, and use it as vehicles for other things. So I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that the only reason we're here is to build bigger businesses. It's way more interesting to go to the young people and say, if we're all into this for time and money freedom, there's lots of ways to do it. So that's been a big takeaway, and you're going to hear more about that this year. Yep. Question, sir.
Yeah. Hey, hi. My name is David with David Quality Painting. What do you guys think about the new Minnesota bill for painting? What are your thoughts about that?
I deep knowledge. Do you want to?
So, well, it depends. If I can get in the fold, I think it's a great idea.
What he's talking about, a bill was proposed earlier this year to license all residential painters or any users of paint in the state of Minnesota.
So if they want to put me on that committee and board, I'm all about corruption, and I would love to. I can be bought.
As the chairman of the PCA, I do not underwrite that.
I would also just say Paris painting only benefits from having a higher bar to jump over for anybody. I would love if it was a $10,000 license. Make it 20. The more, the better. Personally, as someone who is passionate about the industry, I don't know what problem this government would actually solve through that. It's not a high enough bar to be meaningful, and the government is great at providing services when the pain is so great that you're willing to put up with a lot of inefficiency and ineffectiveness, and it's just not that painful yet. I think right now you put any kind of barrier or bar in, and you're going to I'm not going to use that word. You're going to mitigate.
Is it a cuss word?
No,
Okay.
It's a word.
Okay, don't.
Not
Never
to
mind.
use it.
Don't, no, stop it. Move on.
But it's actually not.
No, but let's just move on.
Okay,
You're good.
going to.
Just like the Abu Dhabi joke, we're not doing this
It's
here.
going
Move on.
to decrease the rate of what is solving the actual problem that needs to get solved. So the real problem is that we don't have enough entrepreneurs in painting. And one of our fellow board members, Juan, is a great example. Juan has built a phenomenal company. He's now influencing the industry in an amazingly impactful way. If you put any kind of hurdle in front of him when he was trying to start his painting company, he may have not gotten in. It may have been just enough to keep him out. And until we start to solve all the problems that we have right now, which are solved through innovation, I don't like keeping entrepreneurs out. Philosophically, capitalist, make a big moat.
Build that moat,
big,
baby.
Giant
Deep
moat.
and wide.
Olive Holdings will yum, 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 eat everybody up. And it will be just the best. Also, if they want me on the committee, more government, the better.
As the board chair of the PCA and somebody who was given the bill right away, I was asked to testify on both sides, interestingly enough, for and against it. And as especially the Gathering of Minnesota Painters, they found us and they wanted some insight. Upfront and honest, I'm completely disillusioned with politics. I pay no attention to it. I have no interest past my town of New Prague and sitting on the Economic Development Authority, City Council, School Board.
That's how democracy dies.
I pay it. Great. It's only one vote. Never mind. That's for later. Anyway, I love the local stuff where people don't have a color on their yard sign when they run for school board, right? So when I get proposed something like this, I'm like, great. I'm so interested in this. This could affect an entire industry. When you read it, there's a big disjoint between what they say they want to do and whatever I'm reading in that thing. And then it just makes me do the thing what I do, which when I encounter politics is, we're better than that. Like, if you actually want to solve this, the PCA is doing it with servant leadership and volunteers, not by that. And when that bill got proposed, I didn't feel this lightning bolt in my gut, like, oh my God, it's all crumbling. Oh my God, moat around Paris. I'm going to have to be one of his minions. It's, yes, Mr. Paris, we're reporting for duty. Yeah. It's like, what I felt was the mission of the PCA is so important that we beat that. We need to race to make sure that this industry is taken care of, so that's not even an issue. Right? It's going to stifle innovation. It's going to stifle the next Nick, the next Juan, the next Jason, things like that. So.
Yeah, and what they're trying to solve, I think it's solved through consumer demand and profit. Yeah. Now, I will say the government is actually good at a lot of things, but it's when the pain is so great that you're willing to put up with ineffectiveness and inefficiency. And there are a lot of things that the government does well.
Police stations.
I'm a big fan.
Huge fan.
The rule of law.
Yeah.
Private property is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
All right. There might be another question, and then it is 4:30. People
it is 4:30, yeah.
Probably drink and do.
To the trade test and law, right? But you still see in California, there's a lot of companies without even the license. So.
Yeah, and certainly this is something that's obvious. I have a more practical feeling, not for or against or apolitical, but when this bill got proposed, the wording is copy and pasted from many other states where it was proposed, and it's very close to California. And when I call my friends in California, the Juan Vasquez's and the rest, the Josh Justins, they relay that, magically, the industry in California isn't that different from everywhere else. And in fact, what you may be seeing is an exacerbation of what's going on in the industry where the haves have more and the nots get driven farther under, too. So...
oliveholdings.com.
Anyway. All right, everybody. Is that it for us?
I think we have time for a couple more questions if anybody has any. Anybody?
It's up to you guys. We'll stay here all night talking about this, then eventually talk to ourselves.
Do I have a head shake that the answer is no. Yeah, the answer is no. You can, or just shoot us DMs and stuff.
Don't call us. Hey, thank you everybody for being here. Looking forward to seeing everybody at the Sherwin event. You guys are awesome servant leaders. Appreciate you all.